Operation Encore is a 501c nonprofit that is helping veterans turn into rock stars every single day. You can learn more about what Operation Encore is doing by going over to their website at www.operationencore.org. That is www.operationencore.org. If you can give them a hand, just click that little donate button or follow all of their social medias and learn exactly what they are doing to change the lives of our veterans every single day. Hey, welcome everybody to Drunk Dudes in a Gun Room. It has been a minute, but I'm happy to be back on. I always look forward to the recordings each week. So today we have got Joel Bouchard, is a doctoral student in psychology, a multi-instrumentalist, record producer, author, painter, Army veteran, business leader, and host of the Philosophy Podcast, From Nowhere to Nothing. I don't know when he sleeps, but I'm sure we're going to find that out here real shortly. So let's bring on Joel.
Hey,
how's it going, man?
Yeah,
Man,
it's good.
You're busy.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
So let's give everybody a quick background. Kind of where'd you grow up and what brought you to the military, man?
Yeah, so I grew up in Western New York my whole life, just out in the boonies. Um, and going to the military, it's one of those things where, especially where I grew up, it's something that a lot of people have done throughout their lives, and something you always think about when you're a kid. And I grew up and I went to community college and I got a 2-year degree and then was just working at McDonald's. And, I didn't want to shell out for student loans, but I knew that I was passionate about education and I was passionate about the country. And I thought, well, this is my opportunity, right? The two goals align. Um, let's join up. So I went and I took the ASFAB and I got a 98 and the the test administrator stopped me afterwards. He goes, "I see you got marked on here that you're going into the Army." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, you could go to the Air Force and get whatever job you want. You could be a translator or something." I said, "No, I want to shoot guns." And he said, "You're gonna regret that, I think." I said, "Oh well, anyways, I'm gonna head in." So I stuck with the Army, and I don't regret it. I had a great time. I I barely qualify as a veteran, right? I normally I wouldn't put myself on a veteran podcast really, other than the fact that I see that you also appeal to music audiences and mental health and those sorts of things. So with the psychology background and with the music interest, I thought it'd be a good crossover. But no, I served 6 years in the reserves as a 92 Alpha Romeo 1. So a logistics guy who specialized in driving around RT-240s, kind of a big vehicle that picks up railroad cars from the top, that sort of thing. It was a brand new unit, so I never deployed, never went anywhere. Pretty boring, but that's kind of the general overview.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you, man, I have respect for everybody that signs up. So I don't care. I've had guys on here that had done a year. I had a gentleman on here that did a year and a half, I believe it was in the Navy, and then came down with Tourette's and had to get put out. Everybody's still a veteran, man. So, I don't knock anybody for not deploying, being in the reserves, National Guard. I mean, amongst us all, we all make fun of each other, but you know, you're still part of the 1% of the population that raised that right hand and swore to the oath. So, I appreciate the service.
Yeah. The fact of the matter is, when anybody goes in, you never know what you're getting into, and so that's what the drill sergeant said on day one. I was kind of tail end of the Iraq war, but you still got in there the first day and they said, everybody look around, 97% of you are getting deployed. Right. And, there was one point where our unit had the 3-day bag packed, in case something went off with North Korea, but nothing ever happened. So that's just the way that it turned out. If something had, I would have gone, nothing did. So, all my stories are training related.
Yeah, yeah. Well, North Korea seems to always be anticlimactic, man. They get you right there, and then the words no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did some time over in Korea as well, and it was the same thing, man. There's a lot of special ops stuff that happens between the two, but it really doesn't involve America too much.
Hmm.
So let me ask you a question, man. When I was going through your profile and everything, you don't see a lot of philosophy students, especially from the military. So what drove that?
Yeah, and I always think this is kind of funny too because looking back at my time, one thing that I sort of thought was universal was philosophy, right? I spent a lot of time in the smoke pit and I never smoked. Uh, just because that's where all the interesting conversations were happening, right? That's where guys were talking about, God and time and space and stuff. So I said, "Oh,
Yeah.
that's what I want to be." But yeah, that was sort of kicked off in my community college career. Um, I didn't really know what philosophy was heading in. Okay, well, it's something about old guys with big beards and dusty books who are mad at the world. It's really not that, right? Everything's philosophical. Anything is philosophical. Everybody is a philosopher. So I always tell people it's your favorite topic, you just don't know it yet. But lots of people have a bad introduction to it. But yeah, my philosophy professor in community college got me real excited about it. He's my co-host on my podcast today.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, it's something that I, since then I've been interested in. And yeah, it's just kind of grown from there.
Now, is that what your doctorate was in? Was philosophy or psychology?
No, psychology. And the reason
Psychology.
for that
Yep.
is because being a reservist, okay, so I used up my Montgomery GI Bill when I was in the reserves, but then when you get out, they don't pay for anything anymore. So you have to
Yeah.
find a yellow ribbon school. And not a lot of people give out money to get philosophy degrees. So
Yes.
so for the yellow ribbon schools, you got to go to for something a little bit more practical. And I think that psychology is about as close as you get, trying to understand the mystery of the human mind and how we think
Yeah.
is very philosophical in nature. So
Well, I'm gonna tell you, it's funny. When I was a kid, my goal was always to be a professional football player. That's what I wanted to do. And I was a great wide receiver. I could catch anything. Just don't expect me to get there very fast. So that ended, high school ended my football career, and my grades. I mean, let's face it, if it wasn't for sports, I wouldn't have graduated. So, my grades wasn't all that great, and so I, went in the army because of that. I got married right out of high school, had family, and needed a job, and not too many people would hire at that time for a guy with no experience of not much. And so until after the military, I never really thought too much about um, psychology. There was a brief moment where I wanted to be like a criminal psychologist. And then I took one class and was like, oh, you got to be really, really smart for this. I'm not that guy. There was a lot of vocabulary. And that is where I struggle. I'm that guy that I used to write notes back and forth to my wife, now girlfriend at the time, and she would hand them back to me in red ink and refuse to respond until I corrected them. She was the brains of the family and still is. But after the military, with PTSD and everything, that's when I started kind of focusing and learning a little bit about the mind, and I'm still learning. I There's so many things that for guys like me anyways, you have to have that aha moment before the obvious kind of clicks in. And I'm kind of getting to a point. I know I'm rambling, but I had a gentleman on here from Britain, and he was talking on my show, and we were comparing notes between his version of Afghanistan and mine, and so forth. And then he mentioned at the end that his podcast was mostly mental health. And I said, "Oh, really?" I said, "There's quite a few of those here too." And he said, "Yeah." He said, "We just got too many veterans that are killing themselves." And that aha moment hit me like, "Oh, that's not just an American soldier problem."
Hmm.
And then I realized, no, this is a human problem. It ain't a veteran. And then I took it, I guess this is the philosophy part of it. I took it a little bit deeper and I'm like, I wonder if the people we were shooting at is over there killing themselves. How did they respond to the other side? It's probably an answer I'll never get, but that was my moment of thinking about that. But I didn't realize how deep and how holding things like PTSD can have on the body. You know, depression and PTSD, it all kind of goes one and one with each other. But what is your experience with that? Have you kind of done any studies on PTSD and how it affects different people?
Yeah, so there's two types of psychologists. There's you know, therapists, and then there's researchers. So I'm people who get PsyDs, psychology doctorates. Those are more clinicians and counselors and those types of things. I'm working on a PhD, which is more research oriented. So a lot of my stuff is like, all right, I'm going to look at brain scans and try to figure out where consciousness originates in the human brain, right?
Okay.
Versus so rather than dealing with people, I more deal with brains.
I mean,
um,
yeah.
but but yeah, no, you learn a lot in the studying for the degree, and personal experience too, right? I think that something that a lot of people kind of stereotype is PTSD as a veteran's
Yeah.
disease, but we all we're all exposed to situations where it's possible we can have it. I struggled for a few months. I had two car accidents back to back that were at over 100 miles an hour, and neither one of them was my fault, but still, just the violence of the impacts, and then back to back in your late teens when you sort of think you're invincible and that nothing's going to hurt you, and then you have these two incidents, and you go, "Oh man, like this is life is suddenly more fragile than you thought." And I think that's the overwhelming part of it, right? That's what
Yep.
PTSD is suddenly coming to the realization that life is much different than you thought it was going to be, much more fragile, much more violent, much more, whatever. And
Yep.
trying to reconcile the viewpoint that you had before the experience with the new world that you've discovered you live in afterwards, right? And
Mm.
that's something that everybody struggles with. But yeah, there's various ways of addressing it, but that's kind of the gist of it from what I've picked up.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. That's absolutely what it is. The majority, and this is something else I've always said on my show, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, but it just kind of makes sense to me. You know, the amount of trauma that a person can handle before it becomes overwhelming really is kind of dictated from where they came from. And you take a person that the worst thing that happened to them was they got a D in math one time. They may not need as much visual stuff going on over there as somebody who grew up and was being shot at all the time in the streets of where they grew up at. Those types of things could really affect how much before things start bothering you. At least that makes sense to me, anyways. And so that's
Yeah,
another reason I don't never compare anybody to each other. I don't never say, "Well, you should be healed by now. I am. I don't know what your problem is."
Are you ready to experience the power of military community right from the comfort of your living room? Introducing Military United podcast streams, now available on the Roku channel. Get ready to dive into a world of incredible stories, inspiring discussions, and the best entertainment the military community has to offer. With our veteran podcast host, you'll gain insights into the experiences that have shaped our heroes. And that's not all. We've got a lineup of talented veteran musicians playing rock, country, and more. Get ready to rock out with these incredible artists who have served our country and are now ready to entertain you with their soulful tunes. But wait, there's more. We've also got veteran comedians who will have you in stitches with their hilarious and relatable stories. Laughter is the best medicine, and these brave men and women know how to deliver it. So gather your loved ones, grab some popcorn, and prepare for an unforgettable journey into the world of military podcast, music, and comedy. With Military United podcast streams now on Roku, you can access all this incredible content with just a few clicks of a button. Military United podcast streams on Roku channel. It's time to honor, entertain, and celebrate the incredible men and women who have served our country. Join us today and experience the power of the military community like
right, because that's what it boils down to, is that everybody's subjective experience is different. And really that means that whatever the objective case is doesn't matter, right? And this can manifest itself in very extreme ways. If you have schizophrenia or something and you have illusions, sure, those illusions or those people or whatever it is that you see is not there, but that
Yeah.
doesn't matter to you, right? That's your
Right.
reality. So that's just an extreme example, but all of us face this um, every day, and in some case, in a lot of ways, it's things that we're unaware of, right? And
Yep.
that's where bias stems from, and that's where preconceptions stem from, and all that stuff that makes us think that we know more than we actually do. But in the case of um, PTSD or trauma, I think it's when that comes up to the surface, right? It's one thing to not be aware of your biases or preconceptions or fears and to go about living your life, but it's another thing to be confronted with them violently and then suddenly realize, oh, at a deep visceral level, this is who I am and this is what I've experienced. And regardless of what the outside truth is, right? It doesn't matter if it's a firework or a mortar shell.
Yep.
To you, something inside is telling you that something is very wrong, right?
Yep.
And that you have to find a strategy or a way to live with that and to get over it. But
Yeah, and that's where you have to put the work in. You have to face things and deal with them, not just take the medication and say, okay, I'm good. You still got to deal with the underlying problem. It's not a cold. You don't need something just to tell the symptoms go away and then you're good. These problems are going to stay there until you deal with them. And it's taken me a long time to realize that. I've spent the last 18 months really, really focusing on myself. And man, I still feel like I got a long ways to go. Some days are better than others, but it's just one day at a time. That's really how I look at it.
yeah, and that's the interesting dichotomy with the military, right? And especially with the transition between generations that we're seeing now is you know, the old school military where you say, yeah, just stiff upper lip, you just got to put up with it. You got to get over it. Just act like nothing's wrong, put it aside. And then, we have the new army is what it's so affectionately called,
Yep.
where, there's a bunch of snowflakes, right? And so I think that both of those are things that are sort of demonized by depending on which side of the age gap you're on.
Yeah.
Whereas I think that they both have important perspectives to offer,
Yep.
and they both have, their weaknesses, right? And so we're going to have to come to a way of deciding what's valuable from each perspective and how to use them. Because, yeah, man, telling guys to just get over it or not talk about it or take the medicine isn't working.
Right.
But at the same time, catering to everybody's feelings doesn't build the kind of resilience you need to have a functioning military. So it's tough.
Yep.
It's a tough
It is.
balance.
And with that being said, I think the VA is going to have a tough time too. I mean, they already are, but I don't think the hard times has even got here yet, because this is the first time we've ever been in a 20-year war where now the PTSD is going to be two different generations. You had my generation where I came in 94 and I retired in 2014. So I was there for what, 12, 13 years of that war. And then you got the other guys that came in after 9/11 and retired and fought the same war for 20 years, who are a whole different generation who require different ways to reach. The way you reach me and the way you talk to me is going to be different than some of the younger generation. And I don't think that the VA is capable of adapting fast enough, just because of the way the government works to really deal with that. So I do think that your nonprofit, your boots on ground mom and pop nonprofits are really going to play a big role in the success of that. But man, I'd hate to be the guy that has to map this out, because I think that's going to be a very, very tough scenario to solve.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's something that you don't hear talked about a lot, um, at least in my psychology training up until this point, is addressing generational differences with
Mhm.
mental illness, right? And I think that you hit the nail on the head. It's going to be really important because the older generation is going to be guys, who played outside, who got knocked around playing football, who did these sorts of things. And then the younger generation is going to be people who have lived on their phones and haven't experienced the same types of things. So their trauma response is going to be different, and how you help them heal is going to be different. So
Yep.
yeah, it's going to be a tall task for sure. But
Yeah, absolutely, man. And my hat's off to any of them that succeed, because it's very important. And it's I never tell people not to use the VA. I really feel like the VA is a hit and miss. No different than when you're dealing with people, man. You don't never know what they went through that day, and so maybe that was just a bad day. Well, you could have just went to a person that was having a bad day in a bad VA. There's other VAs, and I've noticed the smaller the clinics, they're a little bit more friendly and personal care that you get. They just can't do as much. But that's why I tell everybody, don't just stop at the first time. But it does worry me with that other generation where this is how they prefer to talk, and they prefer text. They don't want to talk on the phone, and they definitely don't know how to interact with people as very well. I mean, I'm a general supervisor where I work, so I do a lot of interviews, and you see it. You see it really drastically, that it's just not taught in this younger generation. So, it will be interesting to see how they deal with that. Um, and that's kind of one reason why my podcast, I focused on a different side of the house. You know, f- my podcast has turned into a nonprofit. I went from just doing this for our local soldiers, just to bring them back in and just have a good time, to having 501(c)s on, to realizing this became therapy for me. And then it turned into a radio station for veteran musicians. And now we're a nonprofit just helping veterans deal with, some of their therapy and telling their story. And so we've got a Roku channel for podcasters and musicians that have their own music videos, stand-up comedians. We've got 4 channels for our radio station, and we're getting ready to start a program for authors and bloggers and magazine article writers, and anything to get them to keep talking, keep getting stuff off their chest until they can find what works for them to really deal with what they're dealing with. And if any of them want to pursue it as a career, then we're here to help promote them and get them known as well. And I've really seen that happen a lot in the musician side of it. We've had several that got invited to go down to Zach Brown's camp, Southern Ground. He does Hero Week for veterans, and a lot of them, it's all just about songwriting and camaraderie and stuff like that. But I had several of them that they got heard on the radio station, and Operation Encore or some other people would reach out and invite them to apply to come down. So I like that side of it because you're celebrating the wins, and that's what I like about it. Um, and it's got I was not a music person before this. It's now got me learning how to play the guitar, and I'm really having a good time. I love the bass guitar, and me and my instructor, at our next event, we're going to play a song together. We're going to play "Nothing Else Matters" by Metallica, and I just love it. It's a lot of fun, man. And so I like to be on that side of it, where if somebody needs help, I'm plugged in enough to refer them to places. But I like to celebrate the wins, man. Um,
yeah, it's great. It's great work. It's fantastic, and it's important because we know psychologically, right, that if you are focusing always on the negatives or focusing always on what's wrong, that becomes a part of your identity, right? And
yep,
so that's a good part of the healing process, is redefining who you are. And that's something that gets lost, right? People always think of soldiers as this one stereotype, and I always
yep,
discourage that, right? People, it's always, oh, well, every time I see a soldier, I thank him for his service. I go, I don't know, because, there's some guys like me that didn't do anything, and there's other guys that are terrible people. You know,
yep,
soldiers are people. You get just the same way you get all types of people in real life, you get all types of soldiers.
yep,
But with that, what comes with that is that, you might have identical uniforms and haircuts and stuff, but everybody has their own personalities and talents, right? So, yeah, we make music, we make art, we write stuff. So it's good to get it out there. It's good to have some exposure.
Yep. We're working on a project with Operation Encore. We're trying to create what's called the VMAs, the Veteran Music Awards. And we want it done in Nashville. We want it on TV just like the regular CMAs. And we want the veterans that have succeeded and made it. Your George Straits and people like that served in the military and are now just full-blown musicians. We want them to host it and announce these independent guys that are, out here grinding. I got artists that are living in vans, driving around America just from gig to gig, trying to get known and get somewhere in their career. At the same time, still dealing with the stuff that they had to deal with. So, they may never be the next Garth Brooks, but my thought is, for that one day, they will be. You know, you get 10, 12 bands to play on TV, one or two songs, and you get some iconic people that also were veterans and did their part for the country to kind of host it and show them, where hard work can get you. And I think it'll be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it sounds awesome.
A lot of work. We got to find a lot of rich people. So if any rich people listen to the two drunk dudes, break out the wallet, But so where did your music come from? How did that come about?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of a weird music background. Lots of times you hear of musicians, it's like, oh, I always loved it, or I started playing piano when I was 4. I wasn't that way. I didn't really care for music when I was younger. And so when I was like 13 or 14, I started listening to classical music. And then when I was 15, me and 3 of my friends just did like the most teenage boy thing you can imagine. We go, let's start a band. None of us play any instruments. You'll be drums and you'll be bass. So I got guitar. So I taught myself how to play guitar. We all taught ourselves how to play instruments, and we did some battles of the bands and some local talent shows and things, and just starting to get some publicity when my drummer got married real young, and my bass player moved out of state to go to college. And I go, man, like I'm 19, like I'm just starting to get into music, and so I feel like I'm missing out. So I took my life savings to Guitar Center and I bought all the instruments and I just bought all the recording stuff. And I said, I'm going to figure this out. Right. So I built a studio computer and just kind of taught myself to do all the things. And now I record all the pieces and put them together and release them. So, yeah, from beginning to the end, I do it all myself. Just write the songs and record them and release them. But
Wow, man, I can't even imagine that. Just editing. I mean, just editing alone is tough. But
yeah,
trying to blend all the music in at the right parts and writing the music for each of the instruments, whew, my hat's off to you, brother. That's tough, man.
yeah, it's fun, so it's like it's one of those things, right? If you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. So and I tend to work pretty fast. So I don't do a whole lot of editing or self-censoring. Usually I'll do a whole album in about 2 weeks.
Oh,
Just sit down and I'll write it while I'm recording and just lay down all the tracks. Mixing is the hardest part, trying to get everything to sound right before you release it. But yeah, no, it's a lot of fun.
yeah, I bet, man. If I get this song down, I'll be happy. You know, I struggle with the six string, the regular guitar. I just for whatever reason I got fat, clumsy fingers that don't like to move very well, and so if the game was to hit every string at the same time, I could probably win. But I struggle, man. It's tough, So the four string bass, me and we're communicating. We're both kind of slow anyway, so it works for me.
Yeah, bass is my favorite instrument to play live, because you can screw up a lot on bass and nobody will notice, right?
Yeah,
If you screw up on guitar or on drums, immediately everybody's like, "What was that?" On bass, yeah, you can hit a couple wrong notes, nobody's gonna know. But
yeah. But I do love it. I love the sound. I love how deep it is. So you know, and it's somebody in the background too. That's kind of more my speed as well. So,
yeah, yep,
but yeah, music is something that has related to veterans for a long time because I always remember in our deployments, you'd see that guy at the beginning of the deployment that sat down each evening and broke out a guitar, and by the end of the deployment, there'd be 8 guys playing guitar on that same stoop next to him and just jamming and having a good time and taking the day of the war out of their mind for just a little bit of time. And so there's an organization out there that's how I'm learning to play too, is Guitars for Vets. Um, and the way it works is you get 10 lessons. And at the end of it, you pick what song you want to learn to play, and they teach you how to play that song in 10 lessons. And then at the end of it, as long as you stuck with it, you get a free guitar and strap and, a few of the other accessories. All the
Nice.
guitars are donated by, it's not Fender. Oh man, I can't think of who it is. But there's one company donates all the guitars to them. I think last year they donated like 1,300 guitars or something like that.
Wow.
So, but it's an awesome organization, and I've been having fun with it. I'm definitely way past 10 lessons, though. I can tell you that much.
Yeah, I always tell people, whenever I'm teaching guitar lessons, it's just like anything else in life, right? You have to put in the work, but
Yep.
if you can make it 2 months, you'll play for the rest of your life, right? You gotta put the calluses on your fingers. You gotta figure out a strum pattern and a pick pattern. But if you can get that far, then it's fun enough that you'll always have it.
Yep. No, absolutely, man. And this has became an addiction. There's like I got 3 expensive hobbies now that I'm gonna need to work 3 extra jobs just to pay for the hobbies. But between guns and guitars and podcasting, I don't know what else I don't think there's anything left to spend money on.
Yeah, I think I bought a bunch of guitars, and I think after I built my 3rd one, my wife was like, "That's enough. You're done now." All right, okay.
Yep. No, it's same way with guns. That's how this podcast started. I don't know if he's curious now how the name started. It was me and my old first sergeant, and he owned a little gun business. And one day out of the blue, I just said, "Hey, why don't we start a podcast?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, well, what would we call it?" I said, "Well, we're always in your gun room building guns and drinking beer. Why don't we just call it 2 drunk dudes in a gun room?" And we filmed the first season in his gun room. So
That's awesome.
it was just a lot of fun, man. I still I am getting ready to rebrand it. He dropped off after season 1 for some personal issues, and so I'm getting ready to rebrand it into a different name. I'm getting kind of burned out on all the love mail I get for the name, but
You have any ideas on what the new name will be?
I am thinking about Tavern Tales with Donald Dunn. That is what I'm thinking about. I haven't completely decided, but that's where I'm
Yeah,
kind of thinking about going.
that's a good one.
Yeah, the thing I love about this is having people like you on that just have interesting stories, man, and just having a good conversation and let the world hear about it. I've always said I don't care if one person watches my show or 10,000 people watch it. I just enjoy the conversation, learning new things about different people. There's been a guy that's finally agreed to come on. I've been trying to get on. He does fire walking therapy.
Hmm.
Doesn't sound very therapeutic to me, but I am interested. So I'm gonna have him come on and see what walking on hot coals does for people. But
Yeah, I'll have to listen to that one. I'm curious.
yeah, me too. He gave a bunch of names of all these great people that I always thought that was like a circus act, but I didn't know it was a form of therapy. But I'll be kind of interested to see. It's coming up. So, but yeah, man. So what is life like right now? I mean, is it just full studying and mostly music, or
Yeah. So you kind of said it in the intro. I get a lot of questions about how I manage my time,
yeah,
and yeah, it's sort of disappointing in the boringness of it, right? But like you have to take some effort out of some decisions, right? So it's like,
yep,
okay, well, I just wear the same color t-shirts every day, and I eat the same food every day, and I go to bed at the same time, and I sleep my 8.5 hours, and then so it's regimented, right?
yep,
Which is good. A lot of people think that'll suck the fun out of things, but it really doesn't, because it frees you up to um enjoy the moment and what it is that you're doing at any given time a lot more.
Yeah.
So, you know, I I handle my different hobbies different ways, right? If I'm writing a book, I try to write for at least an hour every single day until the book is done. Music, on the other hand, that's more of the type of thing that I submerse myself in, right? So, every I try to practice on any given instrument, for a few minutes each day just to keep the skills up. But for the most part, I don't do a whole lot until it comes time to write an album. And then I'll actually, I'll take some time off from work and I will just get into it, completely into it all day, every day until the album's done. So yeah, it bounces around quite a bit.
Yep.
Some things you do a little bit each day, other things you do a lot for an extended period of time. But um, it's like you said with the podcast, right? And this is the important part: is that you have to enjoy what you're doing, and
Yep.
you see that with some musicians or who they want to make a career out of it, but it becomes work for them, and you go, man, if you want to be making good art, it has to be fun. It has to be something you want to do. You want, like you said, when I put out albums, like I refer to myself as the world's worst marketer, right? I don't market my music, I don't market my podcast, I don't do any of that stuff. I just put it out there because if people want to listen to it, good for them. But I'm doing it for me, right?
Yep.
I'm doing it because I love making music, because I love talking philosophy and doing those things. So you have to be doing it for you because hey, it's life is all you have. And it's not a game, right? Because at the end of a game, you get to celebrate your victory. At the end of this game, there's nothing. So you got to enjoy the journey, right? You got to be enjoying what you're doing as you're doing it. So
Yep. And I think the other thing too, when you turn it into work, you lose that authenticity. If you're
mhm.
more worried in the podcasting world, if you're more worried about likes and downloads and everything else, then your content and interacting with your content, then people are going to see that. And it's going to hurt you in the long run, and it's going to make life more frustrating for you because you're not getting where you want to be. When you want to be Joe Rogan, so you try to turn it into a full job to get there, you lose that journey, and you make a lot of mistakes on the way because you don't have the authenticity. You're trying to copy somebody else's, and the reason why Joe Rogan made it to where he is because he's authentic. How he is on his podcast. He doesn't care about that podcast. He started it by recording himself in the house just doing stupid things and inviting friends over to talk. That was
Yeah,
before they knew what podcasting was,
right. Yeah.
and that's
And
the whole.
yeah, that is the whole point, right? Podcasting isn't some separate thing from having good conversations. It is having good conversations just via technology. So that's the thing is you see like 90% of podcasts don't make it 10 episodes. And I think the reason for that is um, that 90% of people are going in and with the goal in mind to track the numbers. Well, what are my downloads? What are my likes? Or with the intent of this becoming a full-time job, right? I think the
Yep.
people who are making it past 10 episodes are the ones they just want to have good conversations. They just want to explore interesting topics with interesting people.
Yep. No, I completely agree. Um, and the other thing about that as well is that's kind of one reason why we wanted to bring veterans in because, for me, like I said, I learned halfway through season one that this was becoming therapy. I was talking to other veterans and we were just interacting with stories. And I found myself talking about things I hadn't even told my family about. And I think it's important. So we incorporated this to get them to not quit. It's not that we think podcasting is real therapy, but we've now got you talking. And I know if you get frustrated when you look at your downloads and you don't see nobody listening, you're like, what is the point? Because at the early stages of it, you haven't realized what you're doing for yourself. You're getting things off your chest. You're making room to deal with the fight the next day. And if you bottle everything up, then what happens? You shut the computer off, you start isolating again, and you're probably not going to go to the VA because you've already had that experience, and you just kind of give up. And once that communication line stops, but at least within our our podcasting group, we've got people that are coming in and giving webinars and teaching different methods, the business side, to give you those quick, low hanging fruit likes and downloads and stuff like that to keep you going. And then we got things like the Roku channel for once people get things figured out and become consistent, we'll put them on the Roku channel as well. And, but the true meaning of it is just until you find something, Season 2, I found a support group called the Warrior's Way Mindset. And that's where the real work, the real therapy came in there. I was in it for, I don't know, a good year or so. And great group. It's not a nonprofit. It's a for-profit organization. But man, they helped me out tremendously, dealing with internal things, like my anger and stuff like that. And realizing, that you may have screwed things up in your life, but you still got to fix those. You still got to deal with those regardless of what was going on in that period. So it helps you take responsibility and allows you to sort things out in a group atmosphere where other people are dealing with similar things. So, I mean, I would have never found that if I wasn't podcasting, And so I think it's important because this becomes a great networking device. And now we're grabbing veterans and bringing them into this little cubby hole where they can share guests and help each other out. And, having a bad day, we already got chats set up. So, people, you could just reach out and chat with them, say, hey man, I'm having a bad day. Let's talk, So we're throwing a bunch of lifelines out there as well as being able to celebrate those wins. And I think that's important, and I'm going to invite you too, as far as, if you want, allow us to start playing your music. We play every song for every veteran, man. It doesn't matter whether you're sitting in the bedroom on your bed, just recording with GarageBand, or if you're trying to become the next Garth Brooks, man, we play every song. So
cool. Yeah. I'll definitely submit some music, but no, it really hits on an important thing, right? Which is, I think that, in the military, they stress resilience, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a lot of resilience is focused on external factors, right? You succeeding and surviving in the outside world, but resilience is it has an internal component too, right? That's the thing, is you can survive the war, you can survive all the difficulties that happen to you on the outside, but if on the inside you don't have the resilience to be able to save yourself, then that's how you end up with the suicide, epidemic that we have currently. So, and a big part of that is finding meaningful relationships, right? And people who are able to support you, and people that you feel comfortable opening up to. So, yeah, again, just really, really important stuff.
Yeah, I agree. I always kind of dumb things down a little bit, but like I said in that support group, the Army gives you every tool you need to survive, from food, water, shelter, even emotions. The only emotion they give you is anger. That's what they want you to use. If you're having a hard time with your PT test, get mad, use that energy, fighting a war, whatever, picture doing this, get mad, The problem is they don't give you, they give you the tools to survive while you're in. But when you get out and you have to deal with problems, you reach in that toolbox, and the only tool you got, the only emotion you got is anger. And you haven't learned any other tools on how to deal with things. That's where the problem comes from. Because once you're out, man, where are you going to, if you want to go take a class, there's somebody's got their money handout and they want some money too. They're not going to just teach you how to deal with your emotions for free. Have you ever wondered how you can help out the show? Well, that is very simple. You can help us out by going to www.twodrunkdudesinAgunroom.com. That is www.twodrunkdudesinAgunroom.com. There's many ways you can help us by listening to the show, supporting the show, liking, sharing, and everything else that comes along with social media. But one of our biggest goals is to help build the nonprofit Heroes Voice Media Foundation. This is a foundation that has decided To start celebrating courage and amplifying heroes, find your voice with Heroes Voice Media Foundation. And it becomes, that thing that you don't want to admit that you're broke, as far as mentally, you don't want to admit that there's a problem. That wasn't what I was taught. And why isn't that my tool ain't working no more? It worked so well over there. You cut me off. I got mad. Why did the problem not go away? And it's tough, man, because, I think that's where it gets taken out on the family. I know that's where it got taken out on my family, I ended up writing a small book. I'm in the process now of getting ready to publish it, but it was more of an explanation to my family on why I was this one kind of guy before everything. And then in my kids' most important pubic years, I became this dick that nobody wanted to be around. And I didn't talk about any of the stuff going on, so they didn't understand things that I was going through. My wife knew there was things because she quit sleeping in the same bed with me because she was getting elbowed and everything else from bad dreams and shit. And so she would ask me what's wrong, and I would tell her just a bad dream, and she'd say, "Well, what was it?" And I'd tell her I don't remember. I wouldn't give her any details. So I put all these into a book and gave it out to my kids. My kids are now grown. They're one's got 4 youngins and the other one's got 2, and so I felt I owed it to them at least that much. My wife and the kids, just to give them the explanation of what I was going through during those time frames and why things developed the way they did. And I felt like that was important, and I think my daughter appreciated it. She's the one that told me I should publish it. I wasn't going to. So now I'm going back, putting a bunch of details in for people who don't know me. But I just think that's kind of a double-edged sword. Veterans don't talk to their families about this kind of stuff because we want to protect them. We don't want them to see the things that we've seen. But then they don't understand when things become overwhelming and we can't control our emotions no more, and I really felt bad for my son. That's who got the brunt of my problems because I hated myself so much. And then when I seen him, I seen myself, and it just made it that much worse, and then finally an aha moment happened, not the best way, but I finally accepted I needed to get some help. And that's when I went and seen a civilian therapist and started getting seen and getting some help. And slowly over the years, progress came. And then now I'm to the point where I'm able to deal with the stuff and talk about it openly and not be all full of tears and blubbering like I've been in the past. But I think it's hard for veterans to learn those tools. If the military would just do a better job of saying, okay, this was a great tool, but it's old and outdated. Now let's give you some new tools that's going to work for your new jobs. You no longer need that crescent wrench. We're going to give you actual wrenches. They come in different sizes, different emotions, and different purposes. And I think if they would just take some time to stop deploying these soldiers over and over. I mean, I did 68 months out of 20 years. That's over 5 years of my life spent in combat zones, and then expected for everything to be perfectly normal. I did 10 years in the special ops community, and the rest has been either mechanized infantry or light infantry. So I was constantly on rotation and deploying. And there should be laws that prevent constantly deploying soldiers over and over and over like that. I get that we haven't had a lot of wars that required it, but I think it's now that it's happened, that's something that somebody should realize. We probably shouldn't be sending people every other year to a combat zone for a year at a time. But and if they had more time towards getting out, there would be time for this training, emotionally, physically, your thought process, everything, start unwiring things and putting you back to the way you're going to need to get over. I mean, I don't even speak the same language as these people I work with. I told one guy, he asked me where I was at, and I said the chow hall, and his response was, "Where is that?"
Yeah.
you know. And I was like, yeah, the lunchroom. Yeah, right. I get it. But it's just habits, man, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and that is that's the difficult part, right? Is, we're talking about how veterans and anybody really heals from this kind of trauma, and that's finding a safe way to open up and to communicate and form relationships. But the very first step with that sort of thing is understanding yourself, right? And
Yeah,
like we were talking about earlier on, the same way that your biases and your preconceived notions are hidden, really your own nature is hidden from you.
it is.
You do not know yourself well at all, and so um, and you're blind to some of the issues that you might have, and so it really takes, like you said, moments that we all have in our lives. Some of them are a bit more messy or climactic than others, but I think that a lot of us come to a realization at some point that, yeah, something's not right. I'm gonna have to make a change. I'm gonna have to do some work, and that's the hardest part, right? Is
Yep,
coming to a realization and then seeing the road ahead and knowing that you're gonna have to make some changes. But
yep.
yeah, it's difficult.
And you are 100% right, because that was the hardest part when I was going through the Warriors Way mindset, was the portions that dealt with your inner you, who you really are. And they kind of start you in that aspect. They ask, what are some of the things that you want to work out? And for me, it was anger. I'm tired of being angry. I'm tired of dealing with things and finding myself crying. That's just then pisses me off and makes me angry, because now I'm crying. And it's just an endless cycle. And so they asked me, so I shared some of my story with him and everything. And he said, well, you understand that's just you, right? And I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you are that guy that gets mad and takes it out on other people. And it doesn't matter why, but you're striking against your den. You're supposed to be the den leader, and you're that guy that is yelling at his own den. He said, is that the leader that you wanted to portray? And I said, well, no. And he said, but that's who you are. And then you start thinking about it. You're like, you're right. I am that guy that gets mad and overreacts and does that stuff. That is me. And then once you can accept and learn the things that you're doing, well, then you can work on changing them. But if you can't accept that that is you, then you're going to continue to do it.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah,
the
that's
sort
the
of
sort of
weird paradox of being a human, is that we possess this ability to self-reflect and to metacognate, right? Think about our own thinking, and really it's change is as simple as just changing your mind, right? But it's
yeah,
so hard to go against the lizard brain, right? The
yeah,
animal brain, the thing, to that flow that you're in. And it's, it takes the realization. You can't just say that you're going to change. Like you said, like, you have to identify the negative behaviors and the negative thought patterns as you before you can make any changes. And you know, that's that's the difficult part. But
yep. And that's, once you start then going back and you learning, your different love languages and the little tests and stuff that they have you take, and you start learning a little bit more about what has made up you and what causes things and your triggers and so forth. Then it becomes frustrating, because for me, the VA would always tell me, well, when you're to that point that you're ready to hit somebody, you need to write down on a piece of paper what's happening in those times. Are you clenching your teeth? I said, no, I'm about to choke the hell out of this guy. You want me to write some shit down on the paper? You know, it just didn't make sense to me. And, you know, th- their process was really the same as the VA. They just present it different. They make it more relatable, you know.
Mhm.
And they have that same understanding where they don't expect you to do it now, but they want you to, when you cool off, to think about it. What was happening before you got to that point? Did you clench your teeth? Did you pierce your lips together and stop breathing? What were these triggers before you exploded? So that you can start identifying that, hey, I'm getting to that point, and start working through those things. And then you find yourself thinking about it as you're getting mad. You're like, okay, what's happening to me? I'm starting to get mad. And it's helped. But man, it is tough. It is tough. No matter how much you don't want to do it, there's things you just have to unwire that you've considered normal for so long, you know?
Yeah, it's all part of mindfulness, right? Being in the moment, right?
Yep.
Not being dictated by your past or by your past experiences, because you'll see articles of scientific experiments that they've done, uh, and they found that, hey, missing one night of sleep can have bad effects on your cognition long term. Then you think back to, okay, basic training,
Yeah.
waking up, sleeping 4 hours a night, getting interrupted to do push-ups and all this
Yep.
other stuff, and doing fire guard and having dudes just jump up in their sleep yelling yes, drill sergeant and stuff, and you go, so yeah, even in a training setting, you're going through stress that can be harmful to you on a long-term level, much less any combat missions or anything else, right? All of these things they shape who you become.
Yep.
But at the same time, uh, like we said, that the human being is remarkably resilient, right? You can learn new thought patterns, and you can reform yourself. But it's a lot harder to do that. It's a
Yeah.
lot harder to do that.
You have to really want it,
Yeah.
and be willing to put in the work. And that's the one thing I noticed. Well, brother, why don't I bring you forward and share a little bit about your podcast, man? Tell people about what it's about, where they can find. I know I've had your website going, but let's give you that moment to shine and tell the world about your music and your podcast.
Sure. Yeah, so the podcast is From Nowhere to Nothing. It's a philosophy podcast. And what we do is we just look at one word each week for an hour, right? We'll take God or time or entertainment franchise reboots, or in this case, we're doing the past, present, and the future. And we'll take an hour and we'll talk about formative thoughts throughout history by philosophers. And then we'll try to discuss the topic um, in sort of cogent terms, and then we'll look at speculative aspects and ask questions about what it means for humanity. So you can find that anywhere you listen to podcasts. My music, just look up my name. I've got 4 or 5 albums out there now. The most recent one is All We Are. It's kind of a psychedelic alternative rock style, but yeah, that's pretty much it.
All right, man. Well, if you don't mind, I'm gonna put you in the green room real quick. We'll throw out the exit video, and then I'll be right with you. All right.
All right.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, man. So I love these conversations, man. I know they get deep, and I know sometimes I kind of get over jealous and put in a lot of info, but I'm very passionate about these things. There's a lot of things with the veteran mindset, and the more you look at it, it's not just the veteran mindset. It's really our whole population right now with all the things that are going on. There's a lot of trauma that's going out there, and a lot of people that are dealing with things in a different way. So it's always good, even though we've kind of gotten away from the military side for a moment. It's always good to dip back and just kind of refresh everybody's mind that there's a lot of stuff going on, and there's a lot of stuff that people can learn from other people, from podcasts as well. And it's awesome when you see veterans like Joel that are succeeding and doing amazing things. You know, I'm a firm believer that if there's a way, a veteran will find that way, regardless of college training or personal training. They're if they want it, they're going to figure it out. And I think it shows every time. So I appreciate y'all coming on, man. I enjoy doing this every week. I hope y'all enjoy the show. We'll see y'all next week. Remember, don't let the day kick your ass. Kick its ass.